The concept of low observable technology, colloquially known as stealth, has stood as the undisputed cornerstone of modern military aviation for nearly half a century. From the geometric angles of the early technology demonstrators to the organic, fluid contours of contemporary multi-role platforms, the ability to operate undetected within contested airspace has defined strategic doctrine. Trillions of dollars have been poured into development programs, manufacturing facilities, and specialized maintenance infrastructure globally, all predicated on a single fundamental premise. If the enemy cannot see you, they cannot engage you. This design philosophy transformed global power projection, allowing a relatively small number of highly specialized assets to bypass dense defensive networks with apparent impunity. However, every paradigm shift in military history eventually encounters a countermeasure, a technological inflection point where the dominant offensive advantage is neutralized by an elegant, evolving defensive response. To understand the profound nature of the current crisis facing low observable aviation, one must first dismantle the sophisticated illusion that allowed these aircraft to rule the skies for so long, and examine how the fundamental physics governing traditional detection systems are being weaponized against the very platforms they were designed to miss. At its core, conventional radar operates on a straightforward principles of active emission and echolocation. A ground station, naval vessel, or airborne early warning platform projects high-frequency electromagnetic energy into the atmosphere. This energy travels outward in a structured wavefront until it encounters an object. When the electromagnetic waves strike a conventional metallic aircraft, the conductive surface acts as a powerful reflector, scattering a portion of the energy in all directions, including directly back toward the originating source. The receiver captures this returned signal, and by calculating the precise time delay between emission and return, alongside the frequency shift caused by the moving target, operators can determine the exact position, altitude, velocity, and trajectory of the contact. This reliance on monostatic configurations, where the transmitter and receiver occupy the exact same physical location, created a predictable environment for aerospace engineers. It established a singular geometric puzzle. If an aircraft could be shaped to ensure that incoming electromagnetic energy was never reflected directly back toward the transmitter, the radar screen would remain entirely blank. The solution to this puzzle gave birth to the first generation of operational low-observable aircraft, characterized by flat, faceted surfaces and sharp, swept edges. These platforms were not invisible in the literal sense. Rather, they were carefully calculated geometric mirrors designed to exploit the limitations of monostatic systems. When a radar wave struck the angled skin of these early designs, the energy was intentionally deflected at extreme angles, away from the originating antenna, scattering into empty space where no receiver was present to catch it. As manufacturing capabilities advanced and computational fluid dynamics matured, these rigid, faceted shapes gave way to continuous, mathematically curved surfaces that achieved the same result with vastly superior aerodynamic efficiency. These modern designs managed to distribute the deflected electromagnetic energy across a wide, unpredictable arc, ensuring that the residual return reaching the enemy transmitter fell well below the ambient background noise of the atmosphere, effectively rendering the aircraft indistinguishable from a stray flock of birds or a localized weather disturbance. Geometry, however, represents only half of the defensive equation. The physical structure of low-observable platforms is augmented by highly sophisticated materials science, specifically designed to address the energy that cannot be cleanly deflected. Radar-absorbent materials form a critical skin over the composite structures of these aircraft. These coatings are engineered to interact with incoming electromagnetic waves at a molecular level, converting the active energy of the radar pulse into thermal energy, which is then dissipated safely across the airframe. The most common varieties utilize carbonyl iron particles suspended in non-conductive matrices, which create a magnetic field interaction that rapidly dampens the strength of the incoming signal. Other advanced treatments rely on carbon nanotube structures and resonant material layers tailored to specific frequency bands, ensuring that even if a wave manages to penetrate the outer layer, its internal reflections cancel each other out before they can escape back into the atmosphere. Through this combination of precise directional scattering and deep physical absorption, the radar cross-section of a massive, heavy combat platform can be artificially reduced to the size of a marble or a small insect. This reduction in radar cross-section created a profound tactical imbalance that redefined global defense strategies. For decades, integrated air defense systems were forced to operate at a massive disadvantage, spending valuable time and energy scanning the skies for signatures that were practically non-existent. A stealth asset could penetrate deep into heavily defended sectors, identify high-value command structures or logistical hubs, and neutralize them before the defending forces even realized their airspace had been violated. This capability fostered a sense of strategic invulnerability, leading to an era where air superiority was viewed not as a contested variable, but as an absolute certainty guaranteed by technological supremacy. Nations invested heavily in single-platform solutions, betting their entire national security architecture on the continued efficacy of low observability, operating under the assumption that the fundamental principles of monostatic radar would remain the global standard for the foreseeable future. Yet this entire multi-billion-dollar apparatus possesses a single catastrophic vulnerability. It is entirely dependent on the assumption that the threat will always come from a single predictable direction. The intricate geometry of low observable airframes is meticulously optimized to defeat radars that emit and receive from the exact same point in space. When an F-35 or a B-2 deflects an incoming radar pulse, it does not destroy the energy, it merely redirects it. The wave still exists, rich with tracking data, cascading through the atmosphere at the speed of light, moving away from the transmitter at a sharp angle. For 50 years, this redirected energy was irrelevant because there was nothing in the empty sky or the distant terrain positioned to receive it. The illusion of invisibility was maintained not because the aircraft stopped reflecting radar waves, but because the defensive infrastructure of the world was looking in the wrong place. The energy was always there, waiting to be collected, a luminous trail of breadcrumbs marking the exact path of the supposedly invisible intruder. As computational power surged and high-speed data networks became ubiquitous, the technological limitations that once made monostatic systems the only viable option began to evaporate. The assumption that radar must always be a self-contained unit consisting of a co-located transmitter and receiver is now thoroughly obsolete. A quiet revolution in sensor architecture has begun to take hold, driven by the realization that the atmosphere is already saturated with electromagnetic energy, and that an aircraft can be tracked not only by what it reflects back to a base, but by how it disrupts the complex web of ambient signals crisscrossing the globe. The moment defensive networks stop looking exclusively for their own echoes and start listening to the broader environment, the fundamental geometric tricks of low observable design begin to fall apart, exposing these highly specialized platforms to an entirely new regime of detection. Furthermore, the physical dimensions of stealth aircraft impose strict limitations on their ability to defeat all types of radar simultaneously. The geometric shaping and absorbent coatings that define low observability are primarily tuned to counter high-frequency tracking radars, such as those operating in the X-band and Q-band, which are commonly used by fire control systems and missile guidance units. These short-wavelength radars require precise, concentrated reflections to achieve a weapon-quality track, making them highly susceptible to the deflecting angles of a stealth airframe. However, when confronted with low-frequency, long-wavelength radars, such as those operating in the VHF and UHF bands, the physical rules of the game change entirely. The wavelengths of these low-frequency systems are often comparable in size to the major structural components of the aircraft itself, such as the wings, stabilizers, or tail fins. When a long radar wave encounters a physical structure of a similar scale, a phenomenon known as Rayleigh scattering occurs. During Rayleigh scattering, the electromagnetic energy does not neatly bounce off the angled surfaces like a mirror. Instead, it wraps around the body of the aircraft, resonating across the structural frame and creating a massive, omnidirectional scattering effect that completely bypasses the geometric shaping of the platform. No amount of specialized coating or precise facet angling can alter this fundamental interaction of physics. Historically, low-frequency radars were relegated to early warning roles because their long wavelengths lacked the resolution required to guide a weapon to a target. They could tell operators that something was in the sky, but not precisely where it was. Consequently, the aerospace industry accepted this minor compromise, focusing their stealth designs on defeating the high-frequency targeting systems that posed the most immediate lethal threat. But this compromise was predicated on the belief that these low-frequency systems would always remain isolated, incapable of communicating precise tracking metrics to the actual engagement systems. That boundary has now been decisively breached. The contemporary theater of operations is no longer defined by isolated sensor platforms operating in silos. It is governed by distributed, high-speed data matrices capable of fusing disparate sensor inputs in real time. A low-frequency radar can now detect the general presence of a low-observable asset from hundreds of miles away, completely unimpeded by its stealth features, and instantly cross-cue a network of other sensors to narrow down the target's location. This interconnected reality means that the strategic insulation once enjoyed by stealth platforms is rapidly eroding. The multi-billion-dollar illusion of invisibility is being systematically dismantled by an array of alternative tracking methodologies that do not care about angular shapes or specialized iron particle paint. The skies are becoming increasingly illuminated by a diverse spectrum of frequencies and sensor geometries, turning what was once a dark, empty room into a brightly lit corridor where every shadow is cast in sharp relief. The crisis facing low observability is not merely an incremental upgrade to existing radar systems. It is a fundamental shift in the geometry of detection. The reliance on a single invisible asset to penetrate a modern airspace is transitioning from a calculated strategic risk to an unsustainable tactical gamble. As the hidden vulnerabilities of these aircraft are exposed by long wavelength resonance and distributed reception networks, the entire doctrine of modern air power is forced to confront a sobering reality. The technology that promised to render conventional air defenses permanently obsolete is running headfirst into the immutable laws of physics and the relentless march of computational processing. The illusion has run its course, and the global security landscape must now adapt to an era where the sky offers no permanent hiding places, and where survival will be determined not by the ability to remain unseen, but by the capacity to endure and overcome an environment of absolute visibility. The operational decay of traditional low observability has paved the way for a radical restructuring of global detection architecture, moving decisively away from the isolated single-source systems of the past toward highly integrated, distributed sensor ecosystems. The fundamental limitation of historical radar design was its reliance on a localized, self-contained paradigm where a single platform acted as both the seeker and the interpreter of electromagnetic data. When a low observable airframe successfully diverted that localized energy into the void, the entire defensive mechanism failed. To break this monopoly on situational awareness, modern defensive engineering has shifted its focus to multi-static and bistatic radar networks, architectures that fundamentally decouple the transmitter from the receiver. By scattering dozens of passive, highly sensitive receiving nodes across vast geographic areas while utilizing a completely separate, heavily protected master transmitter, the geometric calculations underlying stealth design are rendered fundamentally ineffective. An aircraft shaped to deflect incoming waves at a 45-degree angle away from a known transmitter merely delivers a perfect, high-intensity signal directly into the waiting antenna of a hidden passive receiver, positioned precisely at that 45-degree offset. This distributed architecture transforms the entire atmosphere into a dense, interconnected web of detection, where data points are constantly cross-referenced and synthesized by high-speed algorithms. The passive nature of these receiving nodes makes them exceptionally difficult to locate, jam, or neutralize, as they emit absolutely no electromagnetic radiation of their own. They sit silently, absorbing the ambient chaos of the sky, waiting for the structural bulk of a low observable platform to slice through the pre-existing matrix of signals. Furthermore, this concept has expanded beyond the realm of dedicated military transmitters to encompass a phenomenon known as passive coherent location, or ambient radar. This methodology entirely eliminates the need for dedicated military broadcasting infrastructure, instead exploiting the massive, omnipresent cloud of commercial civilian signals that already blankets the modern world, including digital television broadcasts, cellular network transmissions, and commercial radio waves. When a stealth platform flies through an urbanized or coastal region, its physical presence disrupts this dense, ambient sea of commercial electromagnetic energy, casting a distinct, moving shadow or creating subtle phase distortions that advanced digital signal processors can detect, isolate, and track with astonishing precision. Simultaneously, the introduction of quantum mechanics into the field of sensor technology promises to permanently close any remaining loopholes in the physics of detection. Quantum radar operates on the principle of quantum entanglement, a phenomenon where pairs of photons are generated simultaneously and linked such that the state of one instantly reflects the state of its partner, regardless of the physical distance separating them. In a practical application, one half of the entangled photon pair, known as the signal photon, is projected outward into the atmosphere via a specialized microwave emitter, while its twin, the idler photon, remains securely trapped within an internal quantum memory cell at the base station. If the outbound signal photon encounters an object in the sky, its quantum state is subtly altered by the interaction before it bounces back or scatters. Because the idler photon is instantly entangled with the signal photon, any alteration experienced by the outbound particle is immediately mirrored and measured within the secure confines of the receiver. This mechanism introduces a level of sensitivity that completely bypasses the traditional mechanics of radar cross-section reduction. The profound advantage of a quantum detection paradigm lies in its absolute immunity to traditional electronic countermeasures, radar-absorbent coatings, and environmental clutter. Conventional stealth paint works by absorbing electromagnetic energy and converting it into heat, or by shifting the phase of the reflected wave to cause destructive interference. However, a quantum radar does not rely on the raw intensity of an echoed radio wave. It relies on the preservation of quantum correlation. A radar-absorbent coating cannot absorb a signal photon without fundamentally destroying or altering the entangled relationship, an action that instantly alerts the internal monitoring system to the precise point of disruption in space. Furthermore, attempts to jam a quantum radar by flooding the airspace with artificial electromagnetic noise are entirely useless, as the receiver completely ignores any incoming photons that do not bear the unique, unbroken quantum signature of the original entangled pairs. Through this methodology, the physical composition, geometric shaping, and material engineering of a low-observable aircraft become entirely irrelevant, as the system tracks the fundamental subatomic disruptions caused by the physical mass of the aircraft moving through three-dimensional space. Beyond the realm of radio frequencies and quantum states, the inescapable reality of thermodynamics presents another insurmountable challenge to the concept of aerial invisibility. Every aircraft operating in the atmosphere is subject to the unforgiving laws of friction, propulsion, and heat dissipation. As a platform accelerates through the air, skin friction generates significant thermal energy along its leading edges, nose cone, and canopy. More importantly, the high-performance turbofan engines required to sustain flight emit massive quantities of hot exhaust gases, creating a prominent thermal signature against the frigid backdrop of the upper atmosphere. While aerospace engineers have gone to extraordinary lengths to mask these signatures by burying engines deep within the fuselage, utilizing curved S-duct intakes, and mixing cool ambient air with exhaust plumes, an aircraft cannot eliminate its thermal footprint without violating the core laws of physics. Modern infrared search and track systems, utilizing long-wave and mid-wave infrared sensors coupled with cryogenically cooled focal plane arrays, can detect these minute thermal anomalies from extreme distances, completely independent of any radar emissions. These advanced optical and thermal tracking systems are increasingly integrated into multi-domain defense networks, providing an entirely separate layer of targeting data that operates completely outside the electromagnetic spectrum targeted by stealth geometry. When combined with artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms, modern tracking systems can analyze thousands of atmospheric data points simultaneously, separating the distinct thermal, electromagnetic, and acoustic signatures of a low-observable asset from natural background noise like clouds, bird migrations, and solar radiation. The computational power available to modern defense networks allows for the real-time fusion of these disparate inputs, creating a unified tactical picture where a target detected vaguely by a low-frequency radar is instantly scrutinized by an infrared search track system and subsequently locked onto by a multistatic passive network. The lone invisible hunter that once dominated the airspace is thus trapped in an inescapable matrix of intersecting physical observations. As the efficacy of hiding in the electromagnetic spectrum plummets toward zero, the overarching doctrine of global air power is undergoing its most significant transformation since the dawn of the jet age. The realization that absolute stealth is a temporary, vanishing luxury has forced military planners to reallocate resources away from slow, ultra-expensive, geometrically optimized platforms toward an entirely different set of strategic priorities: raw speed, mass distribution, and electronic dominance. If an aircraft can no longer rely on remaining unseen, its survival depends on its ability to outrun, outmaneuver, or completely overwhelm the defensive systems attempting to engage it. This has triggered a massive global race for the development of hypersonic propulsion systems, where aircraft and missile platforms operate at speeds exceeding Mach 5. At these velocities, the primary defense is not the avoidance of detection, but the sheer compression of time. Even if a multistatic or quantum radar detects a hypersonic asset the moment it launches, the defensive network has only a matter of seconds to calculate an intercept trajectory, rendering traditional defensive response timelines entirely obsolete. Concurrently, the concept of air superiority is shifting from a reliance on a small number of exquisite, high-value stealth platforms to the deployment of massive, distributed autonomous swarms. By utilizing hundreds of low-cost, expendable unmanned aerial vehicles operating in tight coordination via decentralized mesh networks, offensive forces can simply saturate an enemy's detection and engagement systems. A multi-static radar network may be capable of detecting everything in the sky, but every defense system possesses a finite capacity for tracking, prioritization, and ammunition. Overwhelming the sensor grid with sheer numbers achieves the same strategic objective as stealth, but at a fraction of the cost and without the fragile dependence on sensitive radar-absorbent coatings. The paradigm of modern warfare has shifted decisively from a delicate game of shadows to a brutal calculation of computational throughput, kinetic speed, and systemic resilience. The era of the invisible ghost is officially over, replaced by a hyper-visible, high-speed reality where the sky belongs not to those who can hide, but to those who can master the chaotic, illuminated web of the modern sensory landscape.